It's a great time of year right now to be Jewish. I think this is the best time of year to be Jewish when we're getting ready for Pesach. We're leading up to the Passover holiday. I was talking to our communications coordinator, Evan, in the office, I think it was last week, about the plan for our Passover e-blasts, and I was commenting to him, I really love the graphics he chose, like the Moses splitting the sea one especially. And he was talking about how this time of year, it just makes him feel warm and happy, just getting ready for the Passover holiday. Now, I know some of us connect to our warm, happy feelings about the holiday through our irritation about all the work we have to do in our kitchens. There are many ways of connecting, emotionally, of course. I think that all of these emotions, whether it's that warm, fuzzy feeling or that like annoyed, sweaty feeling, they're getting at the same thing, the sense of anticipation, and I think really, for everyone, warmth leading up to the Seder. It's a special moment every year for connecting with our tradition, but also with family, friends, and, of course, food. So, this brings us to the topic for our learning this morning, which is our Haggadah. I've been thinking about teaching this for a little while, but probably about a couple months, and I want to go over this morning some basic information and some essential information about how the Seder goes. I think that all of us know the feeling of the Seder, the arc of the Seder. We start with enthusiasm, wine, and some strange vegetables. Then somewhere in the middle we get a little bit lost, and then at some point there's an overwhelming amount of food. Some is strange, some is familiar. Then people start to leave before the end, which is kind of uncommon for a Jewish gathering, and there's a lot of singing. I feel like the Seder is the only Jewish event when it's actually socially acceptable to arrive on time and leave early. But I digress. So we know the basic feeling of the Seder, but we get a little fuzzy on the component parts, and so that's what I want to go over today. We all know there are a great variety of Haggadot in the world. The one that I love to use for this overview level learning is, of course, the Maxwell House Haggadah. I had to bring it. This is not an advertisement. I just love this one, and here's why. It's kitschy and fun. It's inexpensive and readily available. It's small in size, and so it's not overwhelming. You're not too worried about spilling stuff on it, or at least, I mean, I'm not. I'm good at spilling stuff on stuff. And it's complete. It contains the full content of the Seder. So here we go. Yalla. A good important reminder, the Haggadah is a prayer book, and the Seder is a prayer service. So there's a lot of words of prayer in here, especially when we start looking at the details. Of course, we know Seder means order, so let's start with the order. So there are 14 different parts to the Seder. There are 4 cups of wine, and so that's the basic structure. So we start with the first cup of wine, then we have Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz, and then the second cup of wine. So then we get into Magid, and this is the part where it all tends to get a little bit fuzzy and like, oh, we need to skip parts and what's going on here. Then eventually you get to the end of that, and we do Rachza, hand washing, then Motzi Matzah. This is where the food starts to happen. Then we have Maror, Korech, the edible parts to the Seder that are quite memorable. Then we have Shulchan Orech, the meal. This is where the person who has never been to a Seder before is like, hasn't dinner already been served? I don't know what's going on. And then we have Tzafon, which is where we find and even eat the Afikomen. Then we still have 2 more cups of wine. We have the 3rd cup of wine with Barech. This is when people start to leave early. And then we have the 4th cup of wine with Hallel and Nirtzah for those of us who love to stick around till the end. Okay. So now we're going to go through in a little bit more detail as we read the Seder and the Haggadah. We're going to break the 14 parts into really 4 chunks or sections punctuated by the 4 cups of wine. Okay, so the first cup. Kadesh. What's Kadesh? It's Kiddush. It's a special Kiddush for Yom Tov, for festivals. And this year, because the first Seder is Saturday night, we had a special paragraph for the end of Shabbat. So Kadesh is making Kiddush over the wine for the holiday. So then we have Urchatz. So we wash our hands like we're going to make motzi, but we don't actually say the hand-washing blessing because we're not yet making motzi. That comes way later, but we are preparing to eat something, and that leads us to Karpas. So the vegetable used for Karpas varies quite widely depending on where your family is from and what your family does. But the vegetable, pretty universal. We're dipping it in salt water. And for those of us who have never been to a Seder before, this Karpas isn't really like eating, it's more like tasting. We're just beginning here. It's not really a food section, even though it is edible, which of course makes sense, right? Everything about the Seder makes sense. Anyway, so then after Karpas, we have Yachatz. This is where Afikomen comes from. So we take the 3 matzot. We've already set up our 3 matzahs when we set the table for the Seder, and we break the middle matzah for yachatz. We know that the matzah is not going to break exactly into 2 equal pieces, so we take the larger of the 2 pieces and we set that aside for afikomen. And this is when, especially if there are kids around, the afikomen is hidden, but at least it's set aside. Okay, so that's all the first cup. Now we're moving to the second cup of wine, and the next up is Magid. Okay, fasten your seatbelts, people. This is by far the longest section of the Seder, and the point of it is to tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt, of our Exodus from Egypt. Over time, this story has been expanded by rabbinic tradition. It's gotten a little bit lengthy over the years, so today we're going to do an overview. We're not going to get into every detail, but we're going to try to provide a roadmap, so it's not so overwhelming. Okay, first part. Halach ma'anya. This is the bread of affliction. We look at the matzah, we proclaim the symbolism of the matzah, and our desire to be free people in the land of Israel. Then we ask the 4 questions. So this is when we fill the second cup of wine. Generally, the youngest person at the Seder asks the questions, which is why it's really important to learn this in Hebrew school. And then after the 4 questions, we have a little moment of rabbinic discussion, and we conclude with this phrase, Baruch HaMakom, which means we praise God. Moving right along, we have the 4 questions already, and now we have the 4 children, or traditionally the 4 sons. The wise one, the wicked one, the simple one, and the one who doesn't know how to ask. There's so much interpretation to be done here. People ask, which child are you? Which is the best? Which is the worst? There's a lot of discussion. But moving right along for the purposes of our learning this morning, then we move to the next section, a little bit of reflection on our history as a people, going all the way back to Avraham Avinu, and we conclude with another moment of rabbinic reflection and prayer, and this phrase, Vehi she'amda, God has always saved us. Then we really start to get into it. We tell the story about how we were in Egypt, we became enslaved and oppressed, and God brought us out with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Biyad chazaka uvizro netuya. I just love that. The mighty hand, the outstretched arm. It's like, yeah. And then we get into the 10 plagues. Dam, blood. Sfardeya, frogs. Kinim, lice. Arov. What does arov mean? I'm not sure anyone knows. This one has a lot of creative translations. We get cattle disease. We get wild beasts. We're not really... Then we move on to dever, pestilence. Shchin, boils. Barad, hail. Arbe, locusts or grasshoppers. And choshech, darkness. And then makat bechorot, the striking down of the firstborn. Okay. Now after that is my personal favorite section. I like to call this section, the rabbis do math. How many plagues were there? Well, according to the rabbis, as many as 250. How does this make sense? I'm not exactly sure, but it's really about enthusiasm, because then we have Dayenu, a profound song of gratitude for all God has given us. And after we have Dayenu, we again kind of get to the heart of the matter, where we identify and explain Pesach, matzah, and maror. These are foods, but they all have symbolic meaning. So Pesach, the matzah, because God passed over our homes and spared our firstborn. I'm sorry, Pesach is the zro, that's the bone. Matzah, because we rushed to leave Egypt, and maror, because our enslavement was bitter, so we eat a bitter vegetable to remind us. Then, this part is essential to the Seder. We make it personal. We say in every generation, each individual must see themselves personally as having left Egypt. This is another moment of a lot of discussion, and what does it mean to you, and maybe cousin so-and-so will bring something that they read or something like that. But in every generation, each person must see themselves personally as having left Egypt. It's essential. We move forward with some more words of praise for God, taken from Hallel, which we say in the synagogue in the morning service. And then we say our blessing over the second cup of wine, and we are done with Magid. Give ourselves air high fives. This is a real moment of accomplishment. We finished Magid. We drank the second cup. And before we get to the third cup, we start eating. So now we've done the Magid, and we're into the eating section of the evening's experiences. So the word to the first-time Seder goer, everything before the meal is tasting and not the meal itself. This can be very confusing to people sometimes for our guests. So this eating section, we move on to the next thing, and this is we drank the second cup already. We haven't yet filled the third cup. We're doing the eating, so we begin with raksah, washing hands. just like we're about to make hamotzi, because this time we actually are. And then we have motzi matzah. We bring out the matzah. This is the moment we've all been waiting for. We say hamotzi. We do a special blessing over matzah, and we have that first taste. The idea here is that this is the first moment when we taste the regular plain matzah that we use for the Seder. Some people like shmora matzah, which is also great, but you don't need shmora matzah. Some people say you do, but this is the whole point. This is the first taste of matzah. Now this year, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, it's okay to eat egg matzah the day before. That's a whole other complicated discussion that we can revisit at Kiddush. But the idea here is that the Seder is the year's first taste of matzah. Okay, our next section, maror. We eat the bitter herb. Again, a variety of different vegetables can work here depending on your custom. And this time we dip the vegetable again, not in salt water, but in charoset, which also varies depending on your custom. We know charoset is meant to symbolize the mortar we used in Egypt, along with the bricks to construct buildings for the Egyptians when we were enslaved. And generally, charoset contains fruit and nuts. It's sweet and tasty to contrast with the bitterness of the herbs. Then, the last of our tasting sections is korech. And Hillel, a rabbi of the Mishnah, an ancient collection of rabbinic literature, gets the credit for inventing this one. We taste matzah, maror, and charoset all in one bite. Then, shulchan orech, we eat the meal. You know, I actually got a question about this earlier this week. Does a Seder need to contain a meal? The answer is yes. Shulchan orech is a festive holiday meal. Indeed, this is an essential part of the Seder. Now, interestingly, dessert is customarily served at this section of the Seder at this point in the evening, the shulchan orech, at the conclusion of shulchan orech. But according to the structure of the Seder, whatever dessert you're having, maybe it's a flourless chocolate cake, maybe it's a selection of cookies, that's not actually supposed to be the last thing that you taste in the evening, because the last food that you're supposed to taste at a Seder is matzah, which brings us to the next section of the Seder, tzafun, in which the afikomen is eaten. But first you have to find it. So many families have a custom of the kids have to find it and then they get a prize or some sort of reward. But even if you don't hide the matzah, you have to eat it as the last taste of food you experience in the Seder evening. And now everyone wants to go home at this point, but we're not yet at the end of the Haggadah. We have 2 more cups to go. So next up is barech. We fill the 3rd cup. We recite the grace after meals, birkat hamazon, over the 3rd cup of wine. Then we drink the wine, and then we fill Elijah's cup. And many families also fill Miriam's cup with water, which is a newer custom. But filling the cup is a short but meaningful section of the Seder. Individuals and families tend to have strong feelings about it. So it's always the best, right, when you have like a family that has lots of strong conflicting feelings about it. That's the most interesting, because this section itself, it contains a contradiction. On the one hand, we're recognizing that Elijah the prophet could come at any time and signal that now is the era in which the world is going to be repaired of all of its brokenness, which is wonderful. We open the front door to show that we welcome that. And on the other hand, we read this text that asks God to violently punish our enemies. So much could be said about this section. Much has been said about this section. But for the purposes of our learning this morning, the Seder still isn't over yet, so we're going to continue. We fill the 4th cup, and we recite Hallel. This is like the Hallel we say in shul. Then we continue with more words of praise, which are, some of you already know this because you like to stay till the end, some of the same words we say in our Shacharit prayer service. Take a close look this year. You'll find them in there. Then finally, we drink the 4th cup of wine. We say a short blessing of gratitude for that cup of wine. And now we're coming towards the end. Even though some or maybe most of our guests at the Seder have already left, the end of the Seder is like a traditional Jewish goodbye. It goes on for quite some time. We sing various lengthy hymns that we only say at this time of year, including and not limited to Ki lo na'eh, Adir hu, Echad miodea, and of course, the most important, Chad Gadya, Chad Gadya. This section is called Nirtzah, and it contains something very important in addition to Chad Gadya, which is perhaps the most important, but seriously, it says next year in Jerusalem. So every year, no matter where we are in the world, even if we expect that next year will again be in Los Angeles or Tel Aviv or Atlanta, wherever we are, we say next year in Jerusalem. So now, this is what I want for you to take away from teaching this morning. There's 2 things. First, I hope you take away an overview. I hope you have a better sense of the overall roadmap of the Haggadah and the Seder, and I hope that some of the topics that we talked about this morning pique your curiosity so that you'll do some more of your own learning. But second, I want everyone to see that at the beginning and the end of the Seder, and of course throughout the Seder, we express our ancient connection to our homeland, to Eretz Yisrael. At the beginning of the Haggadah, at the beginning of the Seder, we say Halach Ma'anya, and we pray that next year we will be a free people in the land of Israel. At the end of the Seder, we say L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim. We pray that next year we will be in Jerusalem. We have been saying these prayers, we have been expressing this yearning for thousands of years. And in our generation, we do have Jewish brothers and sisters who are free people in the land and nation of Israel, who have their Seder in Jerusalem. This isn't just a good time of year to be Jewish. This is a good time in history to be Jewish, where we are and can continue to strive to be a free people in Israel and in Jerusalem. May we all have a Zis Pesach, a Chag Asher V'Sameach, and when we express our gratitude through the words of our Haggadah, may we feel our gratitude for the land of Israel, for the nation of Israel, and not only for our freedom from slavery in Egypt, but our ability to personally, each one of us, go and be in Jerusalem as Jews and as free people. Shabbat Shalom.